In this lesson, we'll use the CC rainfall effect to add rain to an illustration. And if you're following along from the previous lesson, you can keep working in that same file where we added the lightning. However, if you're just joining us, I'll be starting from folder 2 in the chapter 3 folder in the exercise files, where I have two After Effects project files. The AEP file is for those using the 2018 Creative Cloud version of After Effects, and the AEPX file can be imported into earlier versions of After Effects. And since I'm using the 2018 Creative Cloud version of After Effects, I'll double click on the AEP file to open that. And so once you have this file open, you'll see that I have files imported into here in the project panel. There's a folder called Linked Art, which contains a series of ping files. And we also have a composition here. And this composition is placed as a layer inside of the Kaiju project composition. So we can have compositions inside of other compositions. And we talked about this in the previous lesson, where this works a lot like Smart Objects in Photoshop or symbols in Illustrator. And before we continue, I would like to take a moment to thank Race Bird for his written permission to include this illustration in the course. So thanks again, Race. And so to create the rain effect, we're going to add a new solid to our composition, which will give us a blank object in which we can apply an effect. So let's start by going up to the layer menu. Let's come down to New and let's choose Solid. In the dialog box here, let's name this Rain. Let's make sure this is the size of the comp. So I'll click Make Comp Size. And then let's come down here and make sure that the color is black. We're going to use a blending mode so that we can get the light areas of the rain superimposed over top of the illustration. So click on the swatch. Let's come down here and make sure that the color is set to black. Let's choose OK. Choose OK one more time. Now in the project panel, we'll get a new folder called Solids, and we'll see our new solid here. And we'll also see the new layer showing up in the timeline panel. In the composition panel, we can see our rain solid showing up here. So now let's head over to the effects and presets. Let's come down here to search. Let's type in the word rain, and we're looking for CC rainfall inside of the simulation group. So let's click and drag on CC rainfall and let's apply it to the solid in the composition panel. Now, in order to see the raindrops superimposed on top of the illustration, we're going to need to use a transfer mode. Or if you're familiar with the term blending modes in Illustrator and Photoshop, it's the same technique. So to turn on blending modes down in the timeline panel, the first way we can do this, if you're using older versions of After Effects, is in this layer here across the top, you can click, come down to columns, and you can turn on modes. If you're using a Creative Cloud version of After Effects, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll have this little icon here, which says Expand or Collapse Transfer Controls. So if I click on this, or if you right-click on columns and turn on modes, you'll see the blending modes showing up here in this column. And again, these work exactly like blending modes in the other design tools. So with the rain solid selected, let's come in here and change the mode to Add. So we're basically adding the lightest pixels to the composition and making transparent all of the dark pixels. So now with this in place, let's go over to the effects and presets and start playing with some of the properties. For the drops, this controls how many drops are being generated. And just like with the lightning and some of the other effects we've seen in this course, this particular effect is also animated. So if I come down to the timeline panel and jog the playhead, you'll see the animation taking effect. So I'll bring this back to 0. Let's go up to our effect controls. And for drops, this controls how many raindrops are generated over time. So if I increase this from 5 up to 10,000, if you look in the composition panel, you'll see the number of raindrops has now increased. And then likewise, if I drag this down to a low number, you'll see fewer raindrops in the composition panel. So I'll come in here and increase this up to about 5,800. Next, we'll take a look at the size of the raindrops. 3 is the default. And I can drag this up to make the raindrops larger or smaller. So for this illustration, I'm going to come in here and type in the number 6. That's going to look pretty good with the illustration style here. Next, speed is going to control how quickly the raindrops are falling. If I increase the speed, you'll see that they actually will sort of stay on the screen longer and have more of a blurring effect. And then similarly, if I drag this down to a low number, the raindrops will only be on the screen for a quick second. And this is used in combination with the animation effect. So if I come down to the timeline panel and jog the timeline, you'll see that these fall much faster. So for the speed, I'm going to leave this at the default. So I'll put that to 4,000. And now the wind controls the direction of the raindrops. So I can click and drag this, and this will affect all of the raindrops as if the wind were blowing. So for this illustration, I do want to set a negative number here. So I'm going to bring this down to about 2190. And then let's come down to the opacity, and let's set the opacity up a little bit, maybe to something that's a little above 40%. And these settings are going to make the rain more closely match the illustration style. And now, as I mentioned in the last video, I used this technique along with the lightning effect to enhance Race's original illustration, so that I could create this web-based animation to promote Russell Brown's pre-conference session at the Adobe Max conference.